Good morning, everyone. In last class, we discussed about the anatomy of the oral cavity. Today, we'll continue the anatomy. In this topic, we'll discuss about the anatomy of the pharynx. The anatomy of the pharynx will deal with these following objectives. We'll start with embryology, introduction, boundaries of pharynx, subdivisions of the pharynx, structure of the pharyngeal wall, blood supply, nerve supply, and lymphatic drainage. Coming to the embryology. The primitive oral cavity or stomodeum appears late in the third prenatal week as a pit or an invagination. This invagination appears as a result of growth of the forebrain anteriorly and enlargement of developing heart. In this diagram, you can see the foregut grows anteriorly and the heart enlarges, creating a pit, primitive pit. This pit or invagination has covering of ectoderm on the outside and endoderm on the inside. Together, they form a membrane known as oropharyngeal membrane. During the fourth week of intrauterine life, this membrane disintegrates to join these both cavities, that is stomodeum and anterior part of the foregut. This anterior part of the foregut forms the definitive pharynx in the child. All the muscles of the pharynx are derived from the fourth and sixth arches, except for the stylopharyngeus muscle. The stylopharyngeus muscle is derived from the third pharyngeal arch. Because all the muscles of pharynx are derived from fourth and sixth arches, they have common nerve supply, that is from the vagus nerve. The stylopharyngeus muscle is derived from the third pharyngeal arch. So it derives the nerve supply from nerve of the third arch, that is the glossopharyngeal nerve. Now coming to the introduction. Pharynx is a conical fibromuscular tube. It is situated behind the nose, behind the oral cavity, and behind the larynx. It acts as a crossroad between the respiratory and food passages. So this is the respiratory pathway and this is the food pathway. It acts as a crossroad. It extends from the base of the skull, which is formed by the body of the sphenoid and basilar part of the occipital bone, and it extends up to the lower border of the cricoid cartilage or C6. The upper part of the pharynx transmits only air, and lower part of the pharynx transmits only food. But the middle part, it helps in the transmit of both air and food. Each of these major pathways or crossroads, they are closed by a particular muscular sphincter. Now coming to the measurements. The length of the adult pharynx is approximately 12 centimeters. The width of the pharynx varies. The maximum width is 3.5 centimeters. It's usually seen in the region of nasopharynx. And minimum is the 1.5 centimeters is usually seen in the laryngopharynx. Now coming to routes of communication. How does this pharynx communicate with the surrounding structures? So the nasal cavity is communicated through the posterior aperture, nasal aperture or the choana. The mouth is communicated through oropharyngeal isthmus. Middle ear through the eustachian tube orifice. Larynx through glottis. Glottis is nothing but a slit-like space between the two vocal cords. And finally, esophagus through the upper esophageal sphincter formed by the cricopharyngeus muscle. Boundaries of the pharynx. Superiorly, as we discussed, it is formed by the base of the skull, which indeed is formed by the body of the sphenoid and basilar part of the occipital bone. Inferiorly, it is continuous with the esophagus at the level of C6 or lower border of the cricoid cartilage. Posteriorly, it glides over the prevertebral fascia and it extends from C1 to C6. Anteriorly, the wall is deficient. So it communicates above to below to the nasal cavity, into the oral cavity and the larynx. Now to summarize about the boundaries. Superiorly, it is related to the base of the skull formed by the body of the sphenoid and basilar part of the occipital bone. Inferiorly, it is continuous with the esophagus. Anteriorly, it communicates with the nasal cavity, oral cavity, and larynx. Posteriorly, by the prevertebral fascia and retropharyngeal space. Am I going too fast? Chat box is open, just reply so that I'll continue. And also comment about my voice. Is it loud enough or not? If it is okay, I'll continue. Okay, fine. Then I'll continue. Now coming to the next topic, that is the subdivisions. The pharynx is divided into three parts, that is nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. The uppermost is the nasopharynx, middle one is the oropharynx, and the lowermost one is the laryngopharynx or the hypopharynx. Now coming to nasopharynx, it is also known as epipharynx. It is situated behind the nose. Nasopharynx is situated behind the nasal cavity. It extends from the base of the skull to the lower border of the soft palate or Passavant's ridge. In the previous class, we discussed about the Passavant's ridge. It's nothing but an elevation in the posterior pharyngeal wall caused by the U-shaped sling of the palatopharyngeus muscle. The main function of the nasopharynx is the respiratory function. Since it is respiratory in function and it is continuous with the nasal cavity, it is lined by pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And the important point to be noted is the walls of the nasopharynx are rigid. They are not collapsible like the rest of the pharynx. Now coming to the boundaries. The anterior wall is deficient. See, there is no well-defined anterior wall. So this nasopharynx, it communicates anteriorly with the nasal cavity. The roof is formed. This is the roof and this is the posterior wall. See, they are present in a continuous line. So the roof and posterior wall are continuous. They slope downwards and backwards. This is supported by body of the sphenoid, basilar part of the occipital bone, and anterior arch of the atlas. The roof and the posterior wall are supported by body of the sphenoid, basilar part of the occipital bone, and anterior arch of the atlas. The entire surface of the nasopharynx is covered by mucous membrane. This mucous membrane has specific or special structures. We'll discuss them in following. The most important one is the nasopharyngeal tonsil. It is nothing but aggregation of the lymphoid tissue below the mucous membrane. The location of the nasopharyngeal tonsil is at the junction of the roof and the posterior wall. This nasopharyngeal tonsil, it projects downwards and it's conical in shape. It contains longitudinal furrows. This nasopharyngeal tonsil is more common in children. As age advances, the size of the nasopharyngeal tonsil decreases. But when the nasopharyngeal tonsil gets infected, it gets enlarged or hypertrophy. Then it is known as adenoids. So normal structure is nasopharyngeal tonsil. If it gets infected, then they are known as adenoids. The other important structure is the pharyngeal bursa. It's also known as pouch of Luschka. It's a mucosal diverticulum that extends into the substance of the nasopharyngeal tonsil. It is nothing but an angular projection due to adhesion of the notochord to the dorsal wall of foregut during development. See, as you can see, it's an inverted diverticulum. If the mouth of the diverticulum get closed, either due to edema or some kind of infection, the secretions get collected here and further it can form a cyst or it can cause inflammation of the surrounding nasopharyngeal tonsil also. Now coming to pharyngeal hypophysis. Hypophysis is pituitary gland. Now coming to what is pharyngeal hypophysis. It's a glandular tissue similar to pituitary gland, that is adenohypophysis. It is derived from the primitive Radke's pouch. Now inferior wall or floor. Inferior wall is deficient. It communicates with the oropharynx through an isthmus known as nasopharyngeal isthmus. See, this is the nasopharyngeal isthmus. Anteriorly, it is bound by lower border of the soft palate. Posteriorly by Passavant's ridge. Laterally by palatopharyngeal arches. Previously, we discussed about oropharyngeal isthmus in the last class. This is nasopharyngeal isthmus. It's a communication between nasopharynx and oropharynx, bounded anteriorly by lower border or posterior surface of the soft palate, posteriorly by the Passavant's ridge, laterally by palatopharyngeal arches. Now coming to lateral wall. Some important structures are seen in the lateral wall. The most important one is the opening or pharyngeal opening. Eustachian tube has two openings. One opening is in the middle ear, another opening is in the pharynx. So we can see this is the pharyngeal opening of the eustachian tube. This is the inferior turbinate. You should know by now, already the anatomy was discussed. At a distance of 1 to 1.5 centimeters from the posterior end of the inferior turbinate, you can find the opening of the eustachian tube. And posterior superior to this opening, there is an elevation or a swelling. This is known as torus tubarius. Further posterior superior to this tubal elevation or torus tubarius, you can see a lymphatic aggregation in this area. This is known as tubal tonsil. Another important structure that is present in the lateral wall of nasopharynx are salpingopharyngeal folds. They start from the inferior surface or inferior border of the eustachian tube opening and they reflect onto the soft palate. They are two in number. These are salpingopharyngeal folds. Whenever you see the word salpingo, it means tube. Anywhere in the human body, whenever there is a word or a prefix known as salpingo, it means tubular. Here the tube is auditory tube or eustachian tube. So salpingopharyngeal folds. And another most important structure or recess that is present in the lateral wall is pharyngeal recess. It's a definite 4-mark question for you. So please listen to this. It is also known as fossa of Rosenmuller. The fossa of Rosenmuller is a slit-like opening. It's a slit-like opening present in the lateral wall of the nasopharynx. Why it is important is it is one of the commonest site for nasopharyngeal carcinoma. It's a deep recess. While doing a nasopharyngoscopy in a normal person, it is it's very difficult to find this fossa of Rosenmuller. It is present like a slit. But this slit leads into a very deep recess in the base of it reaches up to the base of the skull. The boundaries of fossa of Rosenmuller are anteriorly. See, this is the fossa of Rosenmuller when you see through a nasopharyngeal endoscopy. When you do a nasopharyngeal endoscopy, this is a slit-like space. This is the fossa of Rosenmuller. It is bounded anteriorly by the eustachian tube orifice and levator velar palate in a fold. Posteriorly, it is related to posterior pharyngeal wall mucosa, and beyond the posterior pharyngeal wall mucosa, it is related to retropharyngeal space. Medially, it opens into nasopharyngeal cavity. Superiorly, it is related to the base of the skull. Till now, the boundaries of fossa of Rosenmuller are obvious, but The other important boundaries are of the apex. Apex is present posterolaterally. It is related to the carotid canal opening and petrous bone apex posteriorly, and foramen ovale and spinosum laterally. So posterolaterally, posteriorly it is related to carotid canal opening and petrous bone. Laterally it is related to foramen ovale and spinosum. And further laterally it is related to tensor veli palatine muscle and mandibular nerve. So the importance of this fossa is it is the common site for nasopharyngeal carcinoma, and it is difficult to see in a normal person, to visualize in a normal person during a nasopharyngoscopy. Now coming to the functions of the nasopharynx. The nasopharynx acts as a conduit for air, and it connects the nose and the larynx. And second point is it ventilates the middle ear through the eustachian tube, and it equalizes the air pressure on the both sides of the tympanic membrane. The third function is it acts as a resonating chamber for voice production. And the last function is it acts as a drainage channel for mucus that is secreted by the nasal and nasopharyngeal glands. Now coming to the second subdivision, that is oropharynx or mesopharynx. It is the middle part of the pharynx. It is situated behind the oral cavity. It extends from soft palate to epiglottis, or from C1 to C3 level. The epithelium of nasopharynx is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. That epithelium changes here. The epithelium here is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Now coming to the boundaries. Anteriorly, the wall is deficient. It leads into the oral cavity. Anteriorly below, it is related to the base of the tongue. This is the vallicula and upper end of the epiglottis. Posteriorly, it is related to the posterior pharyngeal wall mucosa, which lies over the body of the axis and C3, upper end of the C3. Superiorly, it communicates with the nasopharynx through nasopharyngeal isthmus. Inferiorly, it communicates with the laryngopharynx. Laterally, it is related to palatine tonsil on either side and tonsillar fossa. The tonsillar fossa is bounded anteriorly by the palatoglossal fold and posteriorly by palatopharyngeal fold. So, palatine tonsil and tonsillar fossa form the lateral boundary of oropharynx. Now, to summarize, you can see the anterior wall is deficient. It reaches into the oral cavity. Below, it is bounded by the base of the tongue, lingual tonsil, and vallicula. Vallicula is nothing but a depression present between the base of the tongue and epiglottis. Lateral wall is formed by the tonsillar fossa and tonsil. Posterior wall is formed by the mucosa covering the C2 and C3, and beyond the mucosa you can find a space known as retropharyngeal space. Now coming to boundaries of the oropharyngeal isthmus. Oropharyngeal isthmus is nothing but a communication between the oral cavity and oropharynx. The boundaries are soft palate above, the dorsal part of posterior 1/3 of the tongue below, on either side by the palatoglossus muscle. So, oropharyngeal isthmus is bounded above by the soft palate, below by the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, and laterally by the palatoglossal arch. Now coming to the function. The function of oropharyngeal isthmus is it closes during deglutition to prevent regurgitation of the food from pharynx into the oral cavity. Once you swallow, you want the food to go downwards. To prevent the regurgitation, this oropharyngeal isthmus closes during deglutition. Now coming to the functions of the oropharynx. So it acts as a conduit for passage of air and food. Nasopharynx, it acts as conduit for only air. Here for both air and food. It helps in pharyngeal phase of deglutition. We'll discuss about phase of deglutition in the next class. And it forms a part of vocal tract for speech sounds. It helps in appreciation of taste. How the posterior 1/3 of the tongue carries taste fibers through glossopharyngeal nerve. That's how we can perceive taste. It also provides local immunity. It is able to provide local immunity because it has lymphatic structures like tonsils, palatine tonsils, and lingual tonsils in the oropharynx. So these capture the antigen and produce the antibodies. Next is the hypopharynx, also known as laryngopharynx. It is the lowermost part of the pharynx. It is situated behind the larynx and partly on either side of the larynx. Say it is present behind the larynx and also on either side of the larynx. It extends from upper border of the epiglottis, that is at the C3 level, up to the cricoid cartilage, that is up to the C6 level. At the level of C6, this hypopharynx continues with the esophagus. Now coming to boundaries. The hypopharynx or laryngopharynx is bounded posteriorly by the prevertebral fascia covering the body of the vertebrae from C3 to C6. Anteriorly, from above downwards, it is bounded by laryngeal inlet, posterior surface of arytenoid cartilages, and posterior surface of the lamina of the cricoid cartilage. See, I think already anatomy of larynx class has been completed for you. You know that only among the laryngeal cartilages, only cricoid cartilage is continuous. So it also has a post lamina. It is a posterior surface of the lamina. So from above downwards, the anterior surface of the hypopharynx is formed by laryngeal inlet, posterior surface of the arytenoid cartilages, and posterior surface of the lamina of cricoid cartilage. Further, this hypopharynx has three anatomical subsites. They are pyriform sinus or pyriform recess, post-cricoid area, and posterior pharyngeal wall. Now coming to pyriform fossa or pyriform recess. It is also known as smuggler pouch. It is called as smuggler pouch because it is a hidden area. The olden days, the smugglers used to hide precious stones in this space like diamonds. Now coming to the extent of the pyriform fossa. On either side of the epiglottis, it extends from lateral glossoepiglottic fold to the upper end of the esophagus. That is the extent of the pyriform fossa. So again, the pyriform fossa extends on either side of the epiglottis from lateral glossoepiglottic fold, also known as pharyngoepiglottic fold, and it reaches up to the upper end of the esophagus. Pyriform fossa is a pyramidal structure, or it is an inverted pyramidal structure. So the opening forms the base of the pyramid and apex is downwards. So the base of the pyramid is upwards and the apex is downwards. The apex of this pyriform fossa is continuous with the upper end of the esophagus. Now coming to the boundaries of the pyriform fossa. So this is the pyriform fossa or recess. it is bounded medially by the airy epiglottic fold, laterally by the posterior, laterally there are two structures. Superiorly, it is bounded by the thyrohyoid membrane and inferiorly by the posterior border of the thyroid cartilage. So this pyriform recess is bounded medially by the airy epiglottic fold, laterally and superiorly by the thyrohyoid membrane, and laterally and inferiorly by the posterior border of the thyroid cartilage. The important point to be noted here is the mucosa covering the pyriform fossa, they contain an important nerve known as internal laryngeal nerve. It is a common site for giving a block in this area. And it is also the pyriform fossa is the commonest site for foreign body to get stuck up in the, whenever the person ingests a foreign body, it is one of the commonest area for the foreign bodies to get stuck up. Now coming to the post-cricoid area, it extends from the level of the arytenoid cartilages and its connecting folds to the inferior border of the cricoid cartilage. So this forms the anterior wall of the hypopharynx. So see, the pyriform recesses are present on the either side. This postcricoid area forms the anterior wall of the hypopharynx. It extends from the arytenoid cartilages and connecting folds up to the inferior border of the cricoid cartilage. Now coming to posterior pharyngeal wall. The posterior pharyngeal wall extends from a line drawn across the upper border of the hyoid bone or at the level of the vallicula to the inferior border of the cricoid cartilage. And laterally, it extends from one apex to other apex of the pyriform fossa. The important point here is the post-cricoid area carcinoma is most common in middle-aged females, and it is also the location for post-cricoid web in the case of Plummer-Vinson syndrome. Plummer-Vinson syndrome is a 2 marks question for you. Plummer-Vinson syndrome. Now coming to the structure of the pharyngeal wall. It has the following layers from inside to the outside. The innermost is the mucosa. Next to the mucosa is the pharyngobasilar fascia. Then next to this pharyngobasilar fascia, there is a muscle layer. This muscle layer consists of inner longitudinal muscles and outer circular muscle. The outermost layer is known as the buccopharyngeal fascia or serosa. Now we'll discuss these structures in detail. See, this is the sagittal section of the pharyngeal wall. You can see this is the innermost layer, that is the mucosa. This is the pharyngobasilar fascia. You can see this constrictor muscles are circular muscles, the superior, middle and inferior constrictor, and the outermost layer is the buccopharyngeal fascia or the serosa. Now coming to mucosal coat. The mucosa of the pharyngeal wall, it is continuous with the mucosa of the eustachian tube, laterally, nasal cavity, oral cavity, larynx anteriorly, and below with the mucosa of the esophagus. But the lining epithelium changes. In the nasopharynx, the lining epithelium is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. In oropharynx and hypopharynx, it is non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Between them, in the transitional zone, the epithelium is covered by the stratified columnar and transitional epithelium. So, This mucosa has some special structures. They are multiple scattered subepithelial collections of lymphoid tissue within the pharyngeal mucosa. They form a ring of lymphoid tissue known as Valde's ring. This Valde's ring consists of nasopharyngeal tonsil, tubal tonsils, palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils, lateral pharyngeal bands, and discrete nodules. See, all these structures are present in the form of a ring. So that's why it is known as Valde's ring. Outer to this ring, you can see other structures. These are lymph nodes. All these structures of the Valde's ring, they ultimately drain into this lymph nodes. So these lymph nodes, they form an external ring. This is known as outer Valde's ring. It is formed by submental, submandibular, jugular, jugulodigastric, and finally retropharyngeal lymph nodes. So Valde's ring, it has an inner Valde's ring and outer Valde's ring. Inner Valde's ring is formed by nasopharyngeal tonsil, tubal tonsils, palatine tonsils, lingual tonsils, lateral pharyngeal bands, and finally discrete nodules on the pharyngeal wall. This Valde's ring is a 4 marks question for you. Now coming to what are the functions of this Valde's ring briefly. It helps in the formation of lymphocytes. These lymphoid structures, they contain antigen presenting cells. They capture the antigen and they present it to the B lymphocytes. Then B lymphocytes, they mature to form plasma cells and they secrete antibodies which produces humoral immunity. At the same time, it also produces cell-mediated immunity by producing the T lymphocytes. So this Valde's ring, it monitors for infective pathogens incoming in air and food, and it provides us with primary defense. Now coming to pharyngobasilar fascia. So after mucosa, the next layer is the pharyngobasilar fascia. It is nothing but a fibrous sheet. It lies between the mucosa and muscle layer. It is thick above. And it is attached to the basilar region of the occipital bone. Posteriorly, it gets strengthened by joining with the median raphe or pharyngeal raphe. Now coming to the muscle layer. Within the muscle layer, there are two kinds of muscles, that is inner longitudinal muscles and outer circular muscles. The longitudinal muscles are palatopharyngeus, stylopharyngeus, and salpingopharyngeus. The circular muscles or constrictors of the pharynx are superior constrictor, middle constrictor, and inferior constrictor muscles. Now coming to longitudinal muscles. The longitudinal muscles, they have named origins. See, based on the name, you can know where the muscle is getting originated from. Stylopharyngeus, stylo. So it arises from the medial surface of the base of the styloid process, which is a part of the temporal bone. Salpingopharyngeus. Salpingo, as I said earlier, wherever you have salpingo, it means tube. The tube here is pharyngotympanic tube, that is eustachian tube. This salpingopharyngeus arises from the inferior surface of the cartilaginous part of the pharyngotympanic tube. Finally, palatopharyngeus. About palatopharyngeus, we have discussed in the last class. It arises from the palatine aponeurosis of the soft palate. Now coming to the function. All these have same function. The function is to elevate the larynx and shorten the pharynx during swallowing. During the swallowing, it closes the palatopharyngeal sphincter to prevent regurgitation of the food. Now coming to nerve supply. All the muscles, all these three muscles are supplied by vagus nerve, except for stylopharyngeus, which is supplied by the ninth nerve or glossopharyngeal nerve. Now we'll discuss in detail. Now coming to stylopharyngeus. You can see this stylopharyngeus is arising from the medial surface of the styloid process. It passes forwards, downwards, and medially. It passes through the gap between the superior constrictor muscle. This is the superior constrictor muscle, and this is the middle constrictor muscle. It passes in the gap between them, and it enters the pharynx. This stylopharyngeus muscle combines with the tendon of palatopharyngeus and salpingopharyngeus, and it ultimately inserts into the posterior border of the lamina of the thyroid cartilage. See, on the inner surface. Now coming to palatopharyngeus. As we discussed in the last class, the palatopharyngeus has two fascicles. These two fascicles, they arise from the upper surface of the soft palate. And it goes downward. Both these fascicles go downward posterolaterally, and they combine to form a single muscle. And they go downwards. This palatopharyngeus muscle, along with the salpingopharyngeus muscle and stylopharyngeus, they form a conjoined tendon, and they get inserted into the posterior lamina of the thyroid cartilage. Few fibers from the palatopharyngeus, it passes around the pharynx to form a U-shaped sling at the level of the Passavant's ridge. This also we discussed in the last class. Now coming to salpingopharyngeus. The salpingopharyngeus, it originates from the lower border of the cartilaginous part. You can see the cartilaginous part. It arises from the cartilaginous part of the eustachian tube. It goes downwards and it joins with the palatopharyngeus muscles to form the conjoined tendon. Sometimes this salpingopharyngeus is also known as the third fascicle or third point of origin for the palatopharyngeus muscle. So the main function of these longitudinal muscles is to elevate the larynx, because it is attached to the thyroid cartilage. Whenever it contracts, it elevates the larynx, and it is also attached to the pharynx. That's where it gets shortened. Whenever it contracts, it happens during swallowing. Now coming to constrictor muscles. There are 3 in number on each side, and they form the major part of the pharyngeal wall structure. They are superior, middle, and inferior constrictor muscles. The important thing to note is the anteriorly, these muscles have attachment to bones, ligaments, and cartilages. But posteriorly, all these muscles, they insert into a fibrous structure known as median pharyngeal raphe. So anteriorly, they are attached to bones, ligaments, and cartilages, that is skeletal structures. Posteriorly, they are attached to only a median pharyngeal raphe, which is nothing but a fibrous band. All these constrictor muscles are arranged in the form of flower pots stacked one on another. That is, the lower part of the superior constrictor is covered by the upper part of the middle constrictor, and the lower part of the middle constrictor is covered by the upper part of the inferior constrictor, like a flower pot stacked one on another. arrangement. The main function of the constrictor muscle is to contract reflexly to produce a peristaltic wave during deglutition and push the food bolus downwards towards the esophagus. The main nerve supply is by the vagus nerve. Now coming to superior constrictor muscle. The superior constrictor muscle has following anterior horizons above downwards. The superior constrictor muscle takes origin from lower border of the medial pterygoid, pterygoid hamulus, posterior end of the mylohyoid line, and finally pterygomandibular raphe. So there are 4 horizons, that is medial pterygoid, pterygoid hamulus, mylohyoid line, and finally pterygomandibular raphe. Now coming to the insertion, you can see it occurs in 3 ways. The upper fibers, they project posteriorly, upwards and medially, and they insert into the pharyngeal tubercle. This is the pharyngeal tubercle. The middle fibers, they are horizontal in nature and they insert into the median pharyngeal raphe. Now coming to the lower fibers. The lower fibers, they project downwards, backwards and medially. They are covered by medial constrictor, but they ultimately insert into the median raphe. Ultimately, they insert into the median raphe up to the level of the vocal cords. Now coming to middle constrictor. Middle constrictor has following bony origins. It originates from lower end of the stylohyoid ligament. See, this is the lower end of the stylohyoid ligament. From lesser cornua. See, this is the lesser cornua. And upper surface of the greater cornua of the hyoid bone. From there, the fibers go upwards, backwards, and medially. Now coming to insertion. As you can see, the upper fibers, they go upwards, backwards, medially, and they insert into this median raphe and also up to the pharyngeal tubercle. Inferiorly, the fibers are downwards, forwards, go downwards, forwards, and medially, and they insert into the median raphe. This lower part is covered by the inferior constrictor muscle. Now coming to inferior constrictor, there are 2 parts. They are known as thyropharyngeus and cricopharyngeus. The thyropharyngeus muscle arises from the oblique line on the outer surface of the thyroid cartilage. And cricopharynx arises from the anterior arch of the cricoid cartilage and also a tendinous arch. You can see this is the tendinous arch. This tendinous arch extends from the cartilage to the thyroid cartilage to the cricoid. This arch transmits a muscle. This is the cricothyroid muscle. So this thyropharyngeus muscle, after arising from the oblique line and also this tendinous arch, goes posteriorly, upwards and medially, and it meets the median raphe. But this cricopharyngeal muscle communicates with the muscle from the opposite side. It doesn't insert into the median raphe. This image shows the entire musculature of the pharynx. These are the constrictor muscles and these are the longitudinal muscles. Now coming to Killian's disease. Between the oblique fibers of thyropharynges of inferior constrictor and horizontal fibers of the cricopharynges of inferior constrictor, there is a space. This is known as Killian's dehiscence. This space is bounded by only fascia, that is pharyngobasilar fascia and buccopharyngeal fascia together. There is no muscle in this area. So this is the common site for perforation whenever you do a esophagoscopy. That is why it is known as gateway of tears. And it is also the site for herniation. Because the wall is weak, there is no support from the muscle wall. This mucosa may get herniated posteriorly. This herniated pharyngeal mucosa is known as pharyngeal pouch. This pouch usually lies posteriorly and more on the left side. It is known as Zenker's diverticulum. It is also known as a pulsion diverticulum. Pulsion means something that pushes forward. So it is known as pulsion diverticulum. It is more commonly present in posteriorly and also on the left side. The reason for formation of the Zenker's diverticulum is, as I told you before, the function of the constrictor muscle is to contract reflexly and produce peristalsis. So they should act in unison. So whenever this thyropharyngeus muscle contracts, this cricopharyngeal muscle should relax. Otherwise, the footballers cannot go downwards. If due to some neurological abnormality, if this cricopharyngeus does not relax and thyropharyngeus muscle contracts, it increases the pressure within the pharynx, and the only way for the pressure to relieve is to form a diverticulum that protrudes or herniates through this Killian's dehiscence. Now coming finally to the buccopharyngeal fascia, there is the outermost layer. It extends. It covers the outer surface of the constrictor and it extends forwards up to the pterygomandibular ligament. Posteriorly, it is attached to the prevertebral fascia. Laterally, it is attached to the styloid process. Superiorly, above the upper part of the superior constrictor, it combines with the pharyngobasilar fascia. Now coming to the important structures that are entering and leaving the pharynx. See, above, this is the superior constrictor and this is the upper margin. Above the upper margin of the superior constrictor and the base of the skull, the wall is dehiscent. It is covered only with the pharyngobasilar fascia. You can see the following structures that communicate through this space. This space is known as sinus Morgagni. The following structures that pierce through this sinus Morgagni are auditory tube or eustachian tube, cartilaginous end, levator velar palatine, ascending palatine artery, and sometimes palatine branches of the ascending pharyngeal artery. Between the middle constrictor and superior between the superior constrictor and middle constrictor, the structures that pass are stylopharyngeus and glossopharyngeal nerve. Now coming to the structures that are passing between the middle constrictor and inferior constrictor, they are internal laryngeal nerve and superior laryngeal artery. Finally, the structures that are present below to the inferior constrictor in the tracheoesophageal group, they are recurrent laryngeal nerve and inferior laryngeal artery. This is an important 4 marks question for you. Sinus of Morgagni is a 2 marks question for you. Now coming to blood supply of the pharynx. The main blood supply of the pharynx is the ascending pharyngeal artery. The other branches are ascending palatine and tonsillar branches of facial artery. And there are numerous branches of maxillary and lingular artery. Branches from maxillary artery are internal maxillary artery are greater palatine, pharyngeal, and pterygoid branches. Branches from the lingual artery are dorsalis lingual artery. The lower parts of the pharynx are supplied by the branches from the inferior thyroid artery. As you can see, the common carotid at the level of the upper border of thyroid cartilage divides into external carotid and internal carotid. Internal carotid does not have any branches in the neck. The external carotid gives rise to a single branch ventrally. It's the only branch given by the external carotid artery ventrally. That is the ascending pharyngeal artery. That is the main branch. Other branches, as we discussed before, are ascending palatine and tonsillar branch from the facial artery and dorsalis lingual branch from lingual artery. And inferiorly, it is supplied by a pharyngeal branch from the inferior thyroid artery. You can see the inferior thyroid artery is a branch of thyrocervical trunk. Superior thyroid artery is the first branch of external carotid artery. You have to note the difference. This pharyngeal branch supplies the lower part of the pharynx. Now coming to venous drainage. Veins from the pharynx, they form a plexus. Superiorly, it is formed by the pterygoid plexus. Inferiorly, the blood is drained by the facial vein. Ultimately, this pterygoid venous plexus and facial vein, they drain into internal jugular vein. Now coming to the nerve supply. As we discussed before, all muscles except the stylopharyngeus is supplied by the motor fibers from the cranial accessory nerve through pharyngeal branch of vagus nerve. The nucleus from which the fibers originate is the nucleus ambiguous. The stylopharyngeus, however, is supplied by the glossopharyngeal nerve. Now coming to sensory supply. Nasopharynx, the sensory supply is by the pharyngeal branch of maxillary nerve through pterygopalatine ganglia. Oropharynx is by the glossopharyngeal nerve, and laryngopharynx is by the internal laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of vagus nerve. Taste sensation or special sensation from the posterior one-third by glossopharyngeal nerve. From the vallicula and epiglottis, the taste sensation is carried by the nerve fibers of internal laryngeal nerve. Now coming to pharyngeal plexus, this is a 4 marks question for you. As we discussed before, muscles of the soft palate and muscles of the pharynx are supplied predominantly by the pharyngeal plexus. It is formed by pharyngeal branch of vagus nerve, pharyngeal branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, branch from superior cervical ganglia, which is the uppermost part of the sympathetic trunk, and finally branch from external laryngeal nerve. This plexus lies between the muscle layer and the buccopharyngeal fascia at the level of the middle constructor. So, pharyngeal plexus is formed by pharyngeal branch of vagus nerve, pharyngeal branch of glossopharyngeal nerve, branch from superior cervical ganglia of sympathetic trunk, and finally branch from external laryngeal nerve. This plexus lies on the buccopharyngeal fascia, which covers the middle constructor muscle at that level. Now coming to lymphatic drainage. Predominantly, the lymphatic drainage goes into retropharyngeal lymph nodes, parapharyngeal lymph nodes, and deep cervical lymph nodes. We'll discuss this in detail now. From the nasopharynx, the lymphatic drainage is carried to upper deep cervical lymph nodes through retropharyngeal lymph nodes and parapharyngeal lymph nodes, and also to the spinal axillary chain of lymph nodes in the posterior triangle of the neck. It is also known as level 5 lymph nodes. So nasopharynx drains into upper deep cervical lymph nodes and posterior triangle lymph nodes. Now coming to oropharynx. Oropharynx, from the tonsil, the lymphatic drainage occurs into the upper jugular chain, that is into the jugulodigastric lymph nodes. Jugulodigastric lymph nodes are present 1 centimeter below and behind the angle of the mandible. So the palpable Jugulodigastric lymph nodes is an important feature of chronic tonsillitis. We'll discuss this in later. From the soft palate and lateral and posterior pharyngeal walls, base of tongue drains into retropharyngeal lymph nodes, parapharyngeal lymph nodes, and ultimately into the posterior cervical group. Now coming to hypopharynx. It contains three distinct anatomical subunits. So pyriform sinus drains into upper jugular chain. The pyriform sinus contains rich lymphatics. So there is high chance of metastasis, nodal metastasis, if a carcinoma occurs in this region. Postcricoid area drains into parapharyngeal lymph nodes and ultimately into the supraclavicular, parapharyngeal lymphs of supraclavicular group and paratracheal chain. Posterior pharyngeal wall drains into parapharyngeal lymph nodes, lateral pharyngeal lymph nodes, ultimately into the deep cervical lymph nodes. Now coming to spaces related to the pharynx. There are two important spaces here. One space, that is parapharyngeal space, it is present on either side of the pharynx. And retropharyngeal space is present behind the pharynx. These two are very important for your examination also. That's why we'll discuss these deep neck spaces in a separate class. So, which also includes the abscesses that occur in this region. So, with this, we'll end the topic here. In next class, we'll discuss about the anatomy of tonsil and also physiology of deglutition. So before I close the class, if you have any doubts, the chat box is open. You can ask me. So any topic here you want me to revise? If you want me to revise again, just ping me in the chat section. Screen share. Okay, I'll talk about fossa of Rosenmuller now. See, fossa of Rosenmuller is a slit-like space present behind the eustachian tube opening. It is normally not visible even when you do a nasopharyngoscopy examination. Anteriorly, the fossa of Rosenmuller is bounded by the eustachian tube orifice and levator villae palatinae. Posteriorly, it is covered by the posterior pharyngeal wall mucosa. Medially, nasopharyngeal cavity, superiorly base of the skull, posterolaterally carotid canal opening and petrous bone apex. Posteriorly, these two structures that form the boundaries of fossa of Rosenmuller posteriorly are carotid canal opening and petrous bone. Posterolaterally, foramen ovale and foramen spinosum. Further laterally by the tensor veli palatine muscle and mandibular nerve. I know you are getting confused between this posterolateral boundary and lateral boundary. That for that you have to read about the base of the skull anatomy. Then you will be more easily you'll be able to understand more easily. Any more doubts? Fossa of Rosenmuller is a definite 4 marks question for you. And this fossa of Rosenmuller is present deeply. So whenever in normal nasal cavity examination, you cannot see it. So whenever there is a carcinoma, you'll miss it. So the patient doesn't present with a mass in nasopharyngeal carcinoma. He presents with a lymph node. That is, the carcinoma has started and it is already metastasis to the lymph node. So all the neck swellings, when you do an FNAC, that is particularly the jugulo-digastric lymph node, if they are metastatic deposits, you should always rule out the nasopharyngeal carcinoma because you cannot visualize it. Patient does not have any symptoms. The only symptom will come with is swelling in the neck. So that which is nothing related to the nasopharynx. So that's why it's very important to know about fossa of Rosenmuller. So whenever there is a neck node without any obvious growth in the oral cavity or pharynx, you'll do a nasopharyngeal endoscopy. Even when, if you not see any growth, you'll take a blind biopsy from that region to rule out the nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Any further doubts? I'm waiting. If you don't have any doubts, I'll conclude the class. Please reply. Okay, thank you then. I'm concluding the class. Thank you. For next class, we'll talk about anatomy of palatine tonsil and also physiology of deglutition. With that, we'll conclude the anatomy and physiology of oral cavity and pharynx. After that, we'll talk about the pathology and clinical conditions of the oral cavity and pharynx. Thank you.